Welcome to the Effekt podcast. In Sweden, no one can hear you scream. I'm Dave.
And I'm Matthew, and we have got a really exciting programme to launch our new brand.
Oh, yes, we have. Oh, yeah.
Haven't we just? Now, some of you may have heard some exciting news if you've had your ears to the internet ground. We're not going to reveal exactly what it is until later on. If you're listening to us first, we want to be the ones breaking this news because it's that exciting. And before that, and it's big, it is big, and particularly it's big for you, Dave, isn't it? It's really big for you. I mean,
it's really big for you too. I mean, it's not as big as the thing. It's not as big as my thing, but it's sorry.
No, let's keep it in.
This is, but it's big.
No, it's not as big as your thing, Dave. But when they told me what it was, I immediately thought, well, there's Dave having an orgasm.
If any of you actually know what the news is that we are going to break in a little while, I don't get hot over that kind of thing. I'd like to say.
Well, all that body horror and wet, slippery, slimy stuff.
But the game, the announcement is all going to be excellent, and we are lucky enough to have got the Fria Ligan guys on the end of the internet, and we have an interview with them, which we're going to play a little bit later on, talking all about this brand new bit of news. So,
but before that, we've got some World of Gaming, haven't we?
We have
stuff that we've been seeing on the internet, which is kind of interesting compared to some of the other developments going on at Fria Ligan and here at Effekt Studios or whatever we are.
You don't say or whatever we are now. We're rebranding as Effekt. I mean, come on, you got to be what's the word I'm looking for? Have faith in your rebrand, Matt.
Yeah,
but we are now Effekt.
We are Effekt, and we'll talk a bit about what that rebrand means for you guys after the first main item, in which we're discussing fire. Initially, fire in Forbidden Lands, but it actually sort of branches out into all the other games. Seriously, all the other games. And then we'll talk about the rebrand, and then we'll have the big interview, and then we'll go squeee after the big interview for a bit, and after that we'll say goodbye.
That sounds like an episode and a half.
Yeah, well, let's try and keep it down to an episode's length.
Well, let's get on with it. There's a lot to be discussed, and we don't want to make people wait too long for that excellent interview with Tomas and Nils. So, World of Gaming, Matt, what did you want to talk about?
Well, in the world of gaming, actually, a lot of Kickstarters have started in this last week. It feels a bit weird, and it makes me think that if we ever do a Kickstarter, Dave, we shouldn't do it in this last week of April because everybody else does it then. But there's a couple of interesting ones that I pulled out. Our old friends at Evil Hat, who make Fate, have kickstarted The Fate of Cthulhu, which I think is particularly interesting given the resurgence in Call of Cthulhu and of Delta Green in the Elder Gods game that we're going to be, that we've all kickstarted through the Call of Cthulhu friction with that. We're going to be inundated with Cthulhu. Of course, Modifius, Fria Ligan's partners, of course, kicked off their whole thing with Achtung Cthulhu. So we've got Cthulhu coming out of our bloody ears.
Well, it's interesting because I've got a number of Cthulhu books from over the years. Got my original one from back in 1980, whatever it was. I've got the one that you gave me on my wedding day,
present,
which is, as I said, was the best wedding present. I don't want to, upset my wife. That was the best wedding present I got. But I did have another couple of other copies, and my younger son Dean, who is big into D&D, had started getting into Call of Cthulhu, and so I was delighted to be able to donate to him one of my other book copies that I'm never going to use, because he's going to go and run it with his mates at university. So I mean that's really
excellent.
Good. I mean, you say you've got Cthulhu coming out of our ears, and we have, but it is one of the most enduring classic games of all time.
I
We've
think
had this
it
conversation
might
before.
be in the future when they're looking at the history of role playing. It might be the best game ever, actually.
It might be.
Yeah, but yes, this Fake Cthulhu is a kind of slightly different one. It's slightly a mashup, I feel, from what I've read about it. If you back it, or even if you don't back it, I think if you just go to the Kickstarter site, you can download a preview sort of starter set in PDF. I haven't done that yet, but I've read about it, and it appears to be a sort of mashup of Cthulhu and the Terminator movies. In the future, Cthulhu has already won. He just wants to win a bit earlier by sending agents back to screw up our timeline. Meanwhile, the good guys are sending agents back to defeat the Cthulhu agents and stuff like that. So it feels a little bit more pulpy.
And it's a never-ending cycle, isn't it? Though, so somebody sends someone back to do something, so you send somebody back to stop them. So they send somebody back to stop them. So you send somebody back to stop that person. And
it's all very timey-wimey.
Everyone's gone back in time, and nobody's actually in the future anymore.
Yes, nobody. The future is empty, which is probably what Cthulhu wanted in the first place. So win for him.
So hurrah!
Yeah. So I don't know whether it's one that I'm going to be rushing to get, but wish him well with that one. There's another Kickstarter that I wish slightly less well for reasons that will become apparent, and that is called the Ballad of the Pistolero. And that is a Wild West game. Now, you and I, we've already kickstarted Western, and for various reasons, that's delayed. We're not sure when we're going to get it. Here's another one, which, if I quote from them, is about the Old West, not the Old West of the real world, but more the Old West of fiction, from the Searchers to the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Red Dead Redemption. It's a D100 game. It feels to be based on sort of Zweihander and before that Warhammer Fantasy Role Playing, the early editions. But
which is fine.
So
I'm not a total I'm not totally against D100 games, but they do feel a little bit kind of old. But I mean, I've played a lot of them over the years. And yeah, it's kind of the look and feel of this. Just looking at the Kickstarter, the artwork is all quite. It's very, very good artwork, but it's all quite cartoony. It seems to have quite a soft feel to it, and so yeah, I mean, I think it's just hit its pledge. So it's been
just
backed.
A pound
it's
over
been
its
backed.
pledges. I'm looking at it now.
So it's succeeded. So yeah, well done to them.
Only just though. Look, it's 34 minutes to go. Crikey! In fact, let me redo that. 34 minutes to go. 79 backers.
It's backed by
just a pound over.
31 pound over.
Yes.
Well, a hit is as good as a mile, or a miss is as good as a mile. So £1 is enough. Yeah, well done to them for getting that. I'm not sure it's the kind of Wild West game I would want to play, because I like the idea of something grittier.
Yes.
Personally, but
more
good
on
luck to them.
that maybe later in the program.
I may not be an entirely unbiased and non-partisan reviewer.
Yes,
as it were.
Okay, now let's move on quickly because we don't want to delay it until the new big interview comes. But before that, do you remember when we were playing the last Forbidden Lands adventure, and you had the idea of setting fire to the Griffin's nest and trying to weaken it that way?
I didn't want to stand in front of it and have it kill me, because I was the one who would obviously have to go and fight the bloody thing.
You were the one who would have to be standing in front and have to take all those blows. As you said, I am the tank. You actually said those words.
Yeah.
I'm going to ban you from my role-playing table forever for saying that, but
never mind. Hey, look, I did play many, many years of World of Warcraft, so it's entirely appropriate comment from me.
Yeah, well, maybe. But we turned to the rule book to find out all the rules about fire, and I cut out a really long pause from what we put out on the podcast, because there are no rules about fire. Well, there are some, but I'll explain what I mean in this recording. If you listen to the last part of our Forbidden Lands actual play, you will have heard our confusion when the party wanted to set fire to a griffin's nest, and we realised that the rulebooks contained very little guidance on fires and damage. In fact, a similar question had been raised in an earlier unrecorded adventure. Then, the adventurers had discovered that ghosts could be dispersed with fire and set about making fire arrows. There are no rules for fire arrows, either for their construction or for their damage. We fudged something about needing cloth and lamp oil to make the arrows, but we never actually needed to work out the damage until this adventure. In the Forbidden Lands Player's Handbook, there is a reference to being broken by fire damage. It suggests using the non-typical critical table, and a couple of very specific applications of fire damage. Well, actually one of those, the Immolate spell, isn't a fire attack as such. Let me quote from the book. You can heat up your victim's blood to the point where he literally bursts into flames. So the damage is done internally. The flames are a symptom of the damage, not the cause. Demons can have a fire attack, which uses the same mechanic as other monster attacks, rolling a number of base dice, in this case between 7 and 12, for an attack which cannot be parried but which can be dodged. Such attacks can't be pushed, so that means a low-powered 7 base dice attack has something like a 1 in 10 chance of inflicting serious damage. And with 12 base dice, the probability of being hurt increases to something like 1 in 3. That said, the victim continues to take damage every turn until putting the fire out with a move roll. There is also the making camp mishap, fire, wherein the campfire gets out of control. Characters must suffer an attack with 5 base dice. In Coriolis, the rules state, if you are in or within close range of a large fire, you will suffer attack rolls once every turn. The GM rolls the attack at your turn in the order and before you act. The size of the fire determines the number of dice on the roll, and that is up to the GM to decide, with no guidelines. Well, we could apply the guidelines from Forbidden Lands, 5 for an out-of-control campfire, 7 to 12 for a demon attack, but those aren't terribly relevant. There is an example of a wildfire in Mutant GenLab Alpha. Roll 6 base dice, it says, if you are caught, which, for a wildfire, seems somewhat small. And given the Coriolis characters are roughly twice as resilient as characters in the other Year Zero games, fire doesn't seem to be that big a risk in the Third Horizon. But Coriolis goes on to say, the number of dice then increases by 1 per turn. As soon as you suffer 1 or more points of damage from the fire, your clothes catch fire, and you will continue to suffer the attack rolls even if you get out of the fire itself. Putting out burning clothes demands a successful dexterity test. You or someone within close range of you may attempt the roll. Armour may be tested. And indeed, there is similar text in an as yet unpublished game, and at the time of writing, unannounced, which starts, a fire is measured in intensity. A typical fire has intensity 6. So, now we have a word at least for the attack strength of the fire, and in a similar paragraph to the one from Coriolis it adds, as soon as a fire inflicts no damage, the fire goes out by itself. I am taking this to mean as soon as no successes are rolled, rather than damage being mitigated by armour, for example. So, from clues between these games we can pull together a set of rules for fire, and in particular guidelines for intensity. I am thinking, for example, that your fire arrow has an intensity of 1. It rolls its normal damage, 1 for a bow, or 2 or 3 from crossbow bolts. Afterwards, on the target's turn, before they act, you roll another single dice. Then, and every subsequent turn, On a 6, you take a point of damage and your clothes catch fire. On a 1 or 2, it goes out. This differs from the rules as stated in Coriolis and the mystery game. I will put this down to the lampoil. And you can put it out with a move roll too. If you take damage, your clothes catch fire. You roll 2 dice the next turn, then 3, and so on. Get pushed into a campfire, then it's 3 attack dice. A room that's partially on fire has an intensity of 4. And it's worth pointing out that the attack still happens even if your player says, "I'm avoiding the fire." The whole room or zone is burning. Well, who am I to argue with Coriolis and Mutant GenLab Alpha? We'll call it intensity 6. But remember, all these increase by 1 die the longer you are in it. You can justify the increase by the fire using the fuel and oxygen in the room, or wherever you are. You can escape the fire with move rolls, but if you take any damage on the way, it comes with you. You are the fuel now. Your clothes are on fire. Treat that with escalating dice as above. Oh, and that demon fire we mentioned at the beginning that doesn't escalate in the same way. The rules in Swedish clearly state that you take the same amount of damage every turn until you put it out. Why is that different from my rules? Demons. They're just weird.
Thanks for that, Matt. I think you're absolutely right. My first impressions of fire in a lot of these games is that it's chronically underpowered. The risk from fire seems to be very, very low indeed. I mean, particularly even with the rules that you quote from, from the mysterious game.
Yes.
An intensity of 6 means you roll 6 dice, and then it goes out if you don't get any damage.
Yeah, and bear in mind,
it's going to go out, isn't it? I mean, it's not.
The chances are you're not going to get any 6s. Well, the chances are very slim that you're going to get 1 6. So you may get 1 point of damage, or not. It might just go out straight away. And that feels to me like if you're caught in a room on fire, really it should be more than that. When I was working out the sort of chances of getting damaged by a demon, 7 dice I worked out was a 1 in 10 chance of getting damaged. And that's not just 1 dice, because of course you're wearing armour. You can use armour against fire. So I was that 1 in 10 chance is getting 3 successes on 7 dice.
Yeah, I've never been convinced with the rule that armour protects you from fire unless it's like fireproof retardant outfit.
I went back and forth over that one. Part of me was thinking, well, surely steel armour in Forbidden Lands would just get really hot and burn you and it wouldn't be very good. But then I thought, oh, sod it, I can't be bothered to sort of create case rules for that.
That's the attitude, Matt. Well done. Sod it, I can't be bothered.
Well, no, I think we're looking for the beauty of the Year Zero system is relative simplicity in play. And when you start saying, well, you can roll armor against arrows, but you can't roll it against fire. What do you do when it's a fire arrow and stuff like that? I thought, let's just let people roll against armor. But I do feel, like you, that fire itself is underpowered. Now, this new mystery game of theirs, it talks about intensity, and I like that word, but 6 just doesn't seem very intense. And I first felt that with reading about, quote, wildfire in GenLab Alpha. If you're caught on I work for the National Trust. We have wildfires on our moorland. It's pretty damn serious. There was a fire burning for days just this week on Ilkley Moor. 60 firefighters working to put it out. Luckily, nobody was caught in it, but if they were, I bet they weren't rolling 60 of damage. No.
And then having it go out when they didn't take any damage. Yeah. I think there's a thing, I mean, you could imagine a situation where you fall into a fire, but you're able to immediately get out of it if it's not a very intense fire. Then that's kind of fair enough. You're not going to die from that if you can get up and get out of it straight away. You might be a bit singed and a bit sore, but it's not going to kill you. But then there is a thing about wildfires are are a different level of intensity. They would need a lot more dice.
Yes.
And also if there was some kind of accelerant involved, so if there was napalm or petrol,
Well, that's it. So
that's going to change the dynamic entirely, isn't it?
In my rules, I've got the fact that all these fires, they increase in intensity turn after turn. So it starts off at 6, but then it's 7, and then it's 8.
Is there a limit?
Oh, I don't think there is a limit yet. Well, the limit is when you get out of the bloody thing, because I did think there is a thing actually. You talk about accelerants, but also about fuel. So I was thinking if it wouldn't have been a long drawn out battle, and obviously the Griffin was trying to escape from the fire after you trapped him in there. But at some point, all that wood in the Griffin's nest is going to be used, and then the fire's going to subside. But not really in terms of the time scale you're talking about in play. So actually, I think there probably isn't a limit. If you'd walked into that fire with the Griffin, then I think it would have gone, as I say, 1 extra attack dice every time you roll. And you'd be then crispy fried pretty quick.
That's fair enough. Is there a crit rating for fire in any of the games where it
there is, rating? Yes. In Coriolis, fire has a crit rating of 1. So that does make the fire in Coriolis more effective because, okay, it might only be rolling 2 6s. So you might only be rolling 6 dice. But if you get 2 6s, then you're taking a crit. And as we all know in Coriolis, if you take a crit, you might die.
Yes, crits equal dead.
Yeah, so there is that in Coriolis. That's Coriolis' saving grace. Because, of course, the number of hit points you get in Coriolis is roughly twice what you get in most of the other games. Yeah. So you're pretty resilient otherwise. But yeah, just come back to accelerants, because I didn't talk about that, but I think it is important. So you used a bottle of aged wine in fighting that Griffin. And I gave you an extra point. I was making those rules up as I went along, but
I did think you were very generous at the time because I've never lit fire to a bottle of wine in my life. Not that I've tried, but I've never considered it to be a risk.
It's really old and expensive wine, so I'm sure it's quite flammable. but yeah, proper accelerants like we're talking about Coriolis again. There might be areas where there's an enormous amount of oxygen. That fire is going to burn more intensity there than a, quote, normal fire. Or indeed petrol or anything that you might stick on a fire in some of these games.
Yeah. Good piece. Thank you, Matt.
And when it comes to the mystery game, of course, the exact mystery will be revealed in a little while.
In a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Before we do that, shall we talk about our rebrand?
Yes, let's do that. Go ahead.
So you may have noticed that your feed looks different if you've subscribed to the feed. You may have seen that the Coriolis Effekt is now the Effekt podcast. And
with a K, spelt the Swedish way.
Spelt the Swedish way. We've been hinting at this previously. We've talked about looking for our new host and stuff and reassuring you that Effekt is spelt with a K in our language, and we're making that pretty permanent now, so you've probably seen all our social media change to the new brand. It doesn't mean that the content's changing, or rather it's reflecting the broadening of the content that we've done over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's also reflecting our aspirations to do things other than just podcast.
Yes.
And shall we talk a little bit about some of that?
Okay, well, let's just before we move on to that, let's just say that the Effekt podcast has also now got a new email address, and we'd love you to tell us what you think about the show, what you think about the rebrand, what you think about what we put on. Just and it doesn't even need to be nice. We'll count it as supportive criticism if you tell us stuff. But if you want to write to us, do write to us at feedback@effektpodcast.org. And remember, Effekt is spelled with a K. Effekt Podcast is all one word. So if you want to support us that way, do just send us a comment. But if you want to support us another way as well, we are now officially launching our Patreon. You're stunned into silence, Dave.
I thought you were going to do a bit of a fanfare, so I was trying not to talk over you.
I don't do fanfares. I'm not at all musical. But yeah, our Patreon we're officially launching it now. We did actually sort of start it. So a few supporters have already discovered it. Thank you very much. We'll probably be giving you your official shout out in our next program after your money's come in, because so far everybody's pledged money, but nothing's been taken from their credit accounts. But let's just say, particularly to our, what I like to think of them as our sort of founding supporters,
yes,
founding
absolutely.
patrons in a way. So let's just give them another informal shout out for having the gumption to seek out the podcast and to pledge at all sorts of different levels. So we've got 5 of them. 5 of them already. I think last time you and I spoke it was only 4. But
It was.
we've gone up to 5. We've got Andy Brick.
Hey, Andy. Woo.
We have mentioned on this programme. He's an old friend of ours, so it's really nice to see him chipping in. Our very first one, though, was Frederick Venberg. So he broke our Patreon cherry, and I'm especially grateful for him for doing so.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
We've got Peter Taylor as well. Okay, we've got Phil Massey, and we have got Rickard. Just Rickard. He hasn't given me his surname. So they're our first 5 patrons.
Thank you very much to all of you for listening in the first place, liking what we're doing, and liking it enough to want to give us a bit of real material support. We really appreciate it. We're not in this for the money, but it's great to get a bit of support like that. So thank you very much to our founding patrons. Thank you, guys.
And already, what these guys have promised will pay for our monthly hosting fees. So we're already past my first target for what I wanted to get out of this. And we're on to our second target. But also, it's worth pointing out that there's 3 different levels you can pledge at. And if you pledge at stationary or privileged level, that's $5 or $10. It all happens in American money because obviously Patreon's an American company. Then you get the level that also includes access to our next project. And that is Tales from the Old West.
That is Tales of the Old West.
Did I say from the Old West?
You did,
I did.
Yeah.
Tales of the Old West. You haven't even got nothing of this to go back. You can see now why we weren't quite so keen on the Ballad of the Pistolero earlier on.
Exactly. Competition. I mean, we are a long way away from getting to a position where this is ready to go.
Yes.
But it's a year 0 hack using some of Forbidden Lands and some Coriolis elements, adding a few bits of our own to some of the mechanics to try and spin up a gritty, hard-hitting, but sort of generational Western game that you can play at any time in the West. You could play different styles of campaign. You could do a wagon train going across the continent, or you can set yourself in a town and do something a bit more focused, a bit more traditional in role playing terms.
Yeah, I think what we're working towards at the moment, in terms of this first sort of iteration of the game, is to recreate the feel of Deadwood. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah,
and it kind of came out of the fact that we like Legends and Adventurers, the supplement that comes with Forbidden Lands, so much for its quick sort of backstory generation. And I was thinking, in the Wild West, you'd need a pretty quick character generation system as well, because it's going to be pretty deadly when the pistols come out. There's no armour in that game, after all. So riffing on what would Legends and Adventures look like for Westerns, originally we set up a document called Legends of the Old West, and then we found out there's another game called Legends of the Old West already. So,
well, I just hang on a second there, Matt. We've been doing a bit of playtesting, and I've been playtesting for a little while. And one of the things that we have found is that the character generation, while it's still quite involved and quite it brings quite a lot of background to it, it's not as quick as the Legends and Adventurers character generation in Forbidden Lands. So it takes probably, depending on how much, depending on how long or how deeply the player wants to think into what they're randomly generating, 20 minutes, maybe 30, if you're going to do that. So we've randomly generated 7 characters, and Yeah, I think that's probably a good average to go with. We can slicken up the process a bit. There are things we're learning from the playtesting, obviously, which will make it a bit quicker. But it's not. I don't want to give our listeners the wrong impression that it's
super quick.
It's super quick, no, because it's
20 minutes I can live with. You have added something which you told me about, and I haven't actually looked at it yet. But I was immediately thinking, oh, that's another level. I don't want it to be. I don't want to slow it down. So yeah, we'll look at making it slicker. But actually, 20 minutes is fine. I think probably.
Yeah. I mean, and it does give quite a lot of background. I mean, there's quite a lot of stuff in there that builds up your character. And for me as a GM, I added the random family generation bit, which is the part you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which I think we do need to work on it a bit to make it a bit better, because I've done a very simplified version that's very quick. But as a GM in a Western setting, Westerns are all about, in one sense, family, and about building your legacy and about staking your place in the land, and that nearly always involves family. And I felt a bit of a void when I'd rolled up the first characters that they appear with no family background whatsoever. They've got personal background, and maybe
we know what their father did as well.
We know what their father did, but we don't know whether their father is still alive, whether he, none of that. So I added this little bit in. Takes a couple of minutes to give the GM and the player that little bit of extra depth that I felt it needed. Because we want to give a game that feels like you're in the Wild West. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be people doing beastly things to other people. It's going to be about breaking the ground and making a new life for yourself and all the risks that entails. It's going to be gritty. It's going to be hard.
It's going to be more about the tension before the guns come out than about when the guns come out. Although when the guns come out, it's going to be pretty deadly.
Absolutely. And the playtest we did the other day is a really good example where there was a gunfight between two NPCs, and the players were desperately trying to stop one of them being involved in the gunfight and protect him. So actually, they weren't involved in the fight at all, other than trying to stop it without killing the other guy. And it was a nice touch, because there was action, there was gunplay, but it wasn't gunplay that they were directly involved. They were involved in a different angle to that particular incident, which worked really nicely.
Cool. Well, of course, I think the interesting thing will be that very shortly our patrons, our stationary and privileged patrons, will get a chance to have a look at what we've produced and give their own feedback as well.
Absolutely, really look forward to that.
And the first thing, I think we've got all sorts of systems cropping up for all sorts of bits of it, but I think we're close to being able to share the character generation system. So that might be the first bit that we send out, and we'll send it out as a bit of a part work, a bit every month, I think.
I think that's a good idea. We do need to do a bit of work to, I think, slicken up some of that character generation and make it just a bit quicker. But we're not far off. You're right. I think a bit of work, and we'll have that in a position to put out on our feeds.
Okay, shall we move on to the big thing?
To the main event. Yeah, exactly. Should we just shut up and let the interview tell us what's going on?
Oh yeah, because you blow it all in the first stage of the interview as well, don't you?
I do. Yeah. Okay, well, let's listen to us talking to Tomas Härenstam and Nils Carlin of the Fria Ligan. With yesterday's really exciting announcement that Fria Ligan is going to publish the Alien RPG. I mean, Alien, one of the best sci-fi worlds ever, by one of the best modern games companies there is. This is going to be something extra special. But with that announcement, I'm delighted to welcome Tomas Härenstam and Nils Carlin from the Fria Ligan onto the show today to try our, one, calm me down a bit, and two, talk all about it. So welcome, Tomas and Nils. It's great to chat with you guys as always and have you on the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks. Good to be back.
It sounds like you've been busy.
It's been really busy, and it's been kind of a weird situation where the project that we've been working on the hardest in the last, 6 months. I mean, the project's been going longer than that, but for the last 6 months, it's really been our complete focus and not really being able to tell anyone or talk about it. That's pretty strange. So this feels good.
I mean, getting this chance. I mean, this is a big big opportunity, isn't it? And this is really exciting. I mean, perhaps the biggest thing for Free League so far. I mean, where did this idea come from, and how have you guys managed to pull it off?
Well, it's interesting. I'm not even sure we really know ourselves, but yeah, I mean, exactly how we did it. But this is kind of the way it played out. We actually had a discussion. Yeah, it's a bit
1 year ago.
Yeah, a bit more. It was in the winter, so 1.5 years ago, about, where we just had a sort of a brainstorm session about what if we were doing a big licensed game. What license would we want the most? And that was just a very open discussion, and we sort of, because we felt that we want, for Free League, we want a combination of our own games with our own worlds and our own IPs like Simba Room and Forbidden Lands, but we also really like working with others in partnerships and in that sense doing license projects. And so we had this brainstorm about what would be like the dream license game for us to do, and we had ended up with a short list of, I believe, 5 licenses, and they were all like, dream things that we would love to do. And Alien was on that list.
It was at the top, right?
Yeah, it was. One of the top 2.
Yeah.
We won't go into the others because they might
pop up some.
possibly happen. So
I was going to say, I was sitting here biting my tongue, stopping myself ask the question, what are they there for?
Yeah, we'll have to get back to that. But after that, and it was a bit of a coincidence, because just a few days later, I happened to have lunch with people that, and just by happenstance, like we started discussing. A guy came up. His name is Joe LaFavi. He runs a business in Hollywood called Genuine Entertainment, and he sort of works as a brand manager, and he sort of knows his way around Hollywood and studios, and has been brokering these kinds of licensing deals. So the guy I lunched with, who worked at Paradox at the time, he put me into touch with Joe. And it turned out that Joe was like a super fan of the Tales from the Loop game, Tales from the Loop RPG. And he was like, so we just sort of found each other immediately, and he really wanted to work with us, and he seemed to be like the perfect person for us to help us, secure, these licenses. So we started talking about this, and I sort of showed him the short list, and we all agreed that for a number of different reasons, Alien was like the perfect thing to try to go for. And that's really where it started. And then he started sort of on our behalf discussing with 20th Century Fox and putting us in touch with the right people. And of course, it was a bit of a process. It took a few months but then, we ended up signing a licensing agreement with them for an Alien role-playing game.
Oh, well, it's remarkable. It's brilliant. I mean, it's and I see that you've got a new writer credited on you with this, Andrew Gasca.
Yeah.
Who I guess has got a sort of long track record with writing canon material for things like Aliens with Fox already.
Yeah, he's been a franchise consultant for Fox on Alien and then a few other franchises as well. And it was actually Joe who put us in touch with Drew. And Drew is, I mean, we're all Alien fans, and we know, we're pretty deep into the lore ourselves. But Drew is on another level. I mean, he's sort of lives and breathes this stuff. So we approached him to write setting material for the game, and we also sort of hit it off really well. So that's what's going on. That sort of started happening, and that's sort of how we started working with Drew on this project as well.
And he's been involved in helping you get the setting right, rather than involvement with the rules. And what I guess also making sure that you don't break canon without authority. Is that the?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, we have a partner, we have on the Fox side also, there are people sort of, that we submit stuff to, and they sort of make sure it's all canon and sort of lives up to their standards and all of that. But Drew is a really good person to have on the team, and Joe as well, because they know Fox, they know the franchise, they know the people there, and of course they know Alien really well. So I mean, they've been like perfect partners for us on this project. Whereas our main job on our end, of course, we're also interested in the setting, of course, but we have like on my side, been doing the rules, graphic design, the art, and getting sort of everything together. So we've sort of been building the game, but the detailed setting has been mainly Drew's job.
Now, I will come to the game bits in a moment. Okay. I've got loads of things I want to ask you about that because having been lucky enough, thank you to see an advance copy of the starter, I immediately saw Martin Grip's hand in the artwork, and it's absolutely great. But one more thing about the sort of the US angle. I mean, Free League has been breaking into the US market with the success of games like Tales from the Loop, but with this step up, as it were, is this the day you smash the US market, or is this the day where you look back and say we've got that? We're really breaking in there now.
Maybe, yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, sure.
I mean, we hope as well with this franchise that it's a franchise that can attract people that normally don't encounter our games. Maybe a little bit like Tales from the Loop found an audience outside our circles. I think that Alien might be very attractive to people that are just into that setting, not necessarily familiar with our games.
I think this will be obviously an RPG book, but I think actually the way it looks and that's the rich setting material that we have and all that, I think even if you're an Alien fan, I think you'll enjoy this book even if you're not even a role player, even though it's of course a game. But I think it can have a pretty wide appeal.
Yeah. And it's funny because we're working with Martin and Christian on the visual side of things, and it's pretty nice because, for example, we just put the finishing touches on the star map for the universe, and this is something this has never been like a real canon star map. There has been some stuff floating around on the internet which is like semi-official, and it's funny. I mean, we of course have to talk to the right people and make sure that everything is as correct as possible. But it also, I mean, just the notion of maybe forming a little bit of the canon for the Alien universe, we're not sure, but maybe, is pretty exciting.
Yeah. I remember West End Games
sort of putting
West End Games ended up creating a lot of Star Wars canon, didn't they? I'm assuming, as you say, everything has to go, to Fox for approval. Has there been any issues with? I'm thinking Martin Grip's art is looking fabulous in the preview document you sent us. Surely they're falling in love with it as much as we are. But did they raise any objections to anything that's been produced so far? You don't need to tell us what.
Well, actually, so far it's been really good cooperation. I mean, I can't go into every detail, but overall it's been a very, very, they've been very easy to work with, and have been having very few, problems, if any, really. So, I mean, we're super happy about that part of things. That's been going really well.
And it's an interesting thing. I mean, I've been a big fan of the Alien franchise from 19 whatever it was when I first saw the original movie, but it's one of those where you don't really, or I haven't sort of had in my mind what the universe looks like. In everything else, Star Wars, Star Trek, all the rest of it, where everything is. Whereas Alien seems to focus much more on that, on the kind of the horror of the moment rather than on the wider story. And it's one of the things that I love about the franchise is its versatility. Each new film taking the basic, there's a nasty alien, deal with it question in lots of different directions. How do you see the game sort of helping maintain that flexibility and versatility of sort of narrative?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we completely agree that the Alien movies have been very focused. I mean, they're like you said, they're very then and there. They're not really describing the universe. They're describing the situation on that spaceship at that particular time. But I think, and that's one of the cool things about the RPG is that we get a chance to tie these things together and expand them and really sort of, show, if not create, but at least compile and show the universe, and which is really cool. But I think as your second question, how to sort of approach these two things, and really we have two game modes in this game, and I think that's a key thing. The horror, the sort of short focused experience, the horror experience, like in the movies, is something we do with something we call cinematic scenarios, and they are very focused. They are very then and there. They can even be placed in different times and different locations. We do have a now date for the game, but you can have cinematic scenarios placed at basically any time in the 400-year timeline that the Alien movies sort of work in. And they are really focused. You have pre-gen characters, and they sort of, you play then and there. It's focused in on action, horror, very intense gaming experiences. And then you have the other game mode is called the campaign mode. And in the campaign mode, it's much more of a sandbox game where you sort of explore the universe and sort of see what's actually there. So by doing these two separate game modes, we try to sort of capture these two parts of the franchise.
Yeah, I think that works really nicely, and I love the idea of the cinematic one-shot game where, it's there will be winners and losers. It's a really interesting concept that, across role-playing games, people have done their own versions of one-shots, and they would have winners and losers. But this is kind of perhaps the first time we've seen actually in the rule system, the designers making it easy for the players to do that, and also having a game where there is a definite winner and a definite loser. Was there anything sort of behind that you're thinking behind that?
That's part of the thing, specifically in cinematic scenarios, that there will be some amount of player versus player. I mean, it's not all about that, but that can definitely happen. And that was something we discussed a lot and also play tested quite a bit. And that because that is a tricky thing in RPGs when characters turn against each other. It's not really, it can get messy and hard to play. So we had to structure that in particular ways. And one way to do that is you have the scenarios divided into 3 acts, and in each act you have a new personal agenda for each character.
I love that.
And that means you can save that really sort of hard PvP stuff to the last act, so that it doesn't all collapse at the beginning, because that happened during playtesting.
It happened big time.
Yeah, so we stuff like that, and but so it's a balance thing. It's a tricky thing, but I think it's the way I think it works now. But you have to sort of, if you're going to play not all cinematic scenarios need to have player versus players, but some definitely will. So that's something to be a bit prepared for, that it can turn ugly at the end, and probably not all characters will get out alive.
No, and it's also, it feeds into the paranoia aspect of the setting and the stories. That, I mean, in the end, maybe you can only trust yourself to survive, and that's something that feeds into the horror aspects pretty nicely. But I mean, you don't have to have any PvP. Everyone might be on the same page, but you never know until you're safe.
Well, I love the idea that you have the agenda for each character for each segment of the game, and every other character will know that everyone else has got an agenda, but they won't know what it is, and it might not be a threatening or a dangerous one for them. It might be one they would wholeheartedly agree with, but actually, like you say, the paranoia of just not knowing is a really nice touch.
Sort of
like
game you think where the GM should prep his players for that in advance, though, and explain that not only is not everybody likely to get out alive, but it might all turn really dreadful in the third act. Or do you surprise players with it, do you think?
I think it's probably wise to prepare your players that there can be an element of PvP, and you can have agendas that will go against the interests of other characters, because it's at least that it's a possibility. I think it's good, and it's also mentioned in the player-facing sections of the book as well, that this is something that can happen. So I do think it's a good idea to let players know that this is at least a possibility. It doesn't necessarily going to happen, but it can.
One other mode that you have that you use in the game is the stealth mode, which again I think is a really nice touch and a really nice way of helping GMs encourage that look and feel of Ripley crawling around the Nostromo, or Newt trying to escape in Hadley's Hope.
Yeah, that's actually something that we introduced after a couple of playtests, where we realized that we needed to, because that was sort of a big thing, that kind of where you sort of move slowly, trying to sort of, you're stopped by some, xenomorph creature or something else, then you sort of try to sort of slowly, carefully move through the spaceship or colony or whatever. And we realized we needed a way to actually structure that a bit more rules-wise. So that's sort of where we ended up. We tried a couple of different versions. First one had a lot more crunch to it. I think the one we landed in is fairly rules light, but it's still a way to structure that kind of movement where you're sneaking, trying to avoid whatever is stalking you and that kind of thing. And it's a way to structure the game that I think works well with what we see in the movies, and it also works well with the maps that we have created for the game, because this part of the stealth mode is kind of a map-based gameplay.
Also, I think it's emphasizes the importance of avoiding conflict and combat in this game, because this game, if you meet some kind of xenomorph, it can turn very deadly very, very quickly. And so one of the main points of driving home the stress and horror is actually to just fear what is out there and trying to avoid it. And that's what I think the stealth mode is trying to do. I don't know if you played the computer game Alien Isolation. That's very much that was the game we looked at, how they did the whole sneak part, because in that game you always try to avoid the alien. If you face the alien, I mean, you have a big problem. You probably will die, and it's something like that here as well.
Well, I remember many times reloading the same bit and trying to stalk past the alien and just getting slaughtered every time, and then getting quite frustrated at the end. And the thing I love about the stealth mode is when I was reading the part of the starter about it, that it kind of reflects what you as a GM often try and do, which is about that you're being stalked by something. But the thing that really struck me was running that as a GM, you run it for the moment when the stalking stops and the attack happens. In this mode, you kind of, the attack is the last, is the last element. You're running it for the stalking rather than from the actual combat at the end, which I really liked that feel
I think
of how it worked.
That's the intention. And like Nils mentioned, that this is a horror game to a large extent, and the horror works actually best before the conflict erupts. I mean, the tension is the highest before, because then when you're in combat, sure, that can be, but then it's sort of, you want to save that moment before the conflict as long as you can.
What I really wanted to talk about, though, is your push mechanic. I love the different push mechanics in all the different games. I love Prayer and Coriolis. I love taking damage in Forbidden Lands and Mutant. This has got a different push mechanic, and it's quite an exciting one. One I think I'm already in love with, and I haven't even played it yet. I've just read it. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is we decided fairly early on that we wanted a version of the Year Zero engine for this game as well, because we think it's a versatile system and that it's been working well for us so far. But then we also realized that this really had to be a system that put the themes of Alien to the forefront. And we sort of looked at other games, how they were doing similar things, and we sort of had a really, fairly long discussions and tests for this. And what we really wanted to sort of emphasize was the stress and fear and the rising tension, and how that can sort of explode into a fit of panic, but it won't do it right away. So sort of this kind of thing where tension builds as you play. So this is the way the system works now, is that every time you push, your stress level increases, and you actually get a stress die, an extra die to roll, which will mean you will actually be more effective when stressed. You will actually be more sharp, more sort of likely to actually succeed. But the stress dice also have, if you roll a 1 on those, you trigger a panic roll, which can send you into a panic, a few different panic effects. Mm-hmm. So basically, the more tension rises, it will actually get sharper, more effective, but also increase the risk of boiling over and just going into a wild panic, which is a nice balancing when you actually play, because it's a very nice physical representation. When your stress increases, you get another stress die, and it sort of builds up, and it's like a 21 or blackjack thing, where it increases, and then at some point it's just going to explode, and you just don't know when and how far you're going to be able to push it. So it's that's the idea.
Yeah, and you get stress die for seeing horrific things. One particular one that I love is when you use automatic fire, you get stress die for using automatic fire. What other things do you get stress dice for?
A couple of different things. I mean, pushing rolls, seeing, being attacked by, some alien creature or something else. Like you mentioned, fully automatic fire. Some specific, one thing that's also worth mentioning here, I think, is the sort of cascade stress effect. You can actually, if another character near you triggers a panic effect, your stress will increase as well. So you sort of affect each other. If one character gets stressed out or panics, all of the others will also be more stressed out. So that's also an important thing, I think.
I think that's good because it shows the growing stress of the group rather than just one person going off the deep end while everyone else is chilling out and taking it easy. Yeah, I really like that. I also like some of the outcomes of panicking. And when I was reading through the list you have there that you roll randomly for, or you roll your dice to see how badly you panic. I had an immediate image. If you panic really badly, you kind of become berserk. And I had an image of Hudson in Aliens when he's just before he's killed, going berserk and saying, "Come on, come on, come on," until one of them comes up and kills him. I thought it just fitted really, really well. Just immediately brought these bits to mind of the movies, which I think you've done a really good job in evoking. The alien feel in
every sort of result on a table like that. We sort of had to go through it and think like, okay, would this be a kind of thing that would happen in an alien movie? And if it was, then it stayed in, and if it wasn't, it had to go. So every kind of thing like that really needed to fit in the feel of the franchise.
Another example is in the first movie. I think is it Lambert or is that the second one? Anyway, one of the crew is cornered by an alien in the ship, and she can't move. She just stares at it, and the other guys wants to flame the alien, but she won't move. And that's another thing that's in the table. You just freeze. You can't do anything. So capture scenes like that.
That was Lambert being just before Parker got himself killed, trying not to kill her. Yeah, brilliant, really good. I know it's kind of early days, but do you have any thoughts of how the Alien RPG
we certainly have some
might
plans.
develop in the future?
The plan is to sort of develop the game along two tracks, which is the cinematic and the campaign track. So for the cinematic side, we're planning more cinematic scenarios, so full cinematic scenarios included in the core game. And more of those are planned as well. And they're standalone for the most part because they're with pre-generated characters, and they usually, as I mentioned, usually not all of them will survive. So they're sort of standalone, but we're also thinking that we'll combine them in longer narratives, not with the same characters, but still events and items and characters from one can carry on into another. So we sort of tied them together. Loose campaigns.
So rewarding the players for being involved in all of them in order. So they're callbacks to things that happened in previous adventures. I see.
Yeah, and also, for example, if the players, if they have a mission and they succeed in that mission, that might affect the setup of the next cinematic scenario as opposed to if they fail. So it will have a cause and effect thing.
Yeah, even though the characters are actually other people, but it could sort of have a knock-on effect on the next scenario. And then we have the campaign track where we're planning campaign books.
Interesting.
We have 3 campaign concepts from in the core game that we sort of focus on and describe. And it's the space truckers. You can sort of like a starship crew, like in the first movie. Then you have the Marines, and then you have explorers and colonists. So they have like 3 different themes, 3 campaign concepts. And we're planning like probably to have expansions for campaign play that focus specifically on each of those 3. So that's what we're thinking about the campaign play.
Yeah, and they will be more like toolboxes where you can use different parts and it can expand the setting, and more like going around in the universe and do missions and see stuff. So they're less focused and more open world. So, but I think they can complement each other pretty nicely.
Yeah. So, and presumably, in terms of each of those campaign styles, the players will be able to play kind of a full range of characters from your Ripley style to your Carter Burke corporate bloke to a different range of sort of archetypes.
Yeah, that's the idea. There's a number of,
in the movies.
I think 8 character archetypes in the core game, and we might add more later. But you would probably recognize sort of where they're inspired from. So we have, you can play your Burke, you can play your Ripley, or that kind of character.
You can play your Newt.
It's the crew of the Betty. Are the crew of the Betty going to be in the core game, or are they going to be in an expansion game?
Good question. I mean, that since this is something that's kind of interesting or worth mentioning maybe, is that we have a now date for our game that is 2183. It was where we landed. So we sort of that's our now, and that's sort of where we are in terms of the timeline. And this is 4 years after.
So where's
Yeah,
where does that fit in?
Four
Where does
years
that fit in the
after
movies?
Aliens, and I think 4
2183.
years after also Alien 3, because they are basically happening very close to each other in the timeline. But it's long
before the
long
Right.
before Alien, the Betsy, and the Alien 4. Yeah, so it's like I think the gap in the timeline is something like 200 years.
Yeah, it's basically another.
So that's almost another universe in a sense. So our era we're focusing on is right after Aliens, and it's the classic era. It's like a number of decades after the first movie, but still in that kind of era. So that's why the Betsy is probably not going to be part of. As far as, I mean, we could definitely do that at some point, do like an expansion that focused on another era, but the core game will be in 2183.
Yeah. I can live with that.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I'm really excited. I think this is fabulous. And when we were finally allowed to know what it was, I thought, yes, that's really good. Alien, what a great thing to take forward. Brilliant. So looking forward, we've got the UK Games Expo in the last weekend of May, first weekend of June coming up in Birmingham here in the UK.
Yeah, we are.
And you guys are going to be there.
Yeah.
We're going to be there with you as well, which is going to be great. So for your fans who want to come and talk about this game and have a look at it, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you've got planned for the expo?
Part of that as well, of course. So, but the idea is you have some say here.
Oh yeah.
But the idea is by then, in about a bit over a month's time, we will have a fairly complete starter PDF. It's fairly comprehensive. I mean, you've seen the current draft. And it's not finished just yet, but it's going to be by then.
Yep.
And the idea is that there will be a chance to try out the game in short demo, sort of survival style, at the UK Games Expo. So if you're coming to Birmingham, you will have a chance to, check out the starter PDF of the game and also try it out firsthand.
It probably be the world premiere of trying the game. Actually.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And we're GMing it. That's great.
That's the idea. And so that's the idea. There will be a pre-order as well. We don't have the exact date set for that yet, though. But that's also coming along in the not too distant future.
Right. So your fans aren't going to have to wait too long to get their hands on that.
Yes.
There are some important things that actually I'm sure fans will be asking. It's not going to be a Kickstarter. It's going to be a pre-order. Is that right?
That is right, yes. We're not planning a Kickstarter for this game. It'll be more of a regular pre-order. But the idea is that if you pre-order the game, you will also have access to the starter PDF almost immediately.
Right.
So you have that as a sort of a good incentive, we think, to pre-order the game, because you get this. Because the full release will be at the end of the year, probably November. But if you pre-order, you'll get access to this comprehensive starter PDF. I think it's like 160 pages.
Yeah.
Well ahead of that time.
Yeah, you can play instantly. Yeah,
and it looks really good. I have to say, we keep saying this. It looks really good,
as always.
And the other question, I'm sure that a lot of, particularly your Swedish fans, are asking: is this going to be in English only, or is there a Swedish version?
There will not. We're not planning a Swedish version for this game. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, we think. I mean, most of the games that we do in Swedish have some kind of Swedish history or other connection of some sort. This doesn't really, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think this is not something we have explored yet, but many of our games have been translated into other languages. There are French and German and Spanish editions of our games, and this could potentially happen for Alien as well.
We might license it to ourselves and do a Swedish version. No, I'm kidding. I mean, we can translate it either way. What we would call it? I mean, it would be a very, very unwieldy word in Swedish. So.
Okay.
And actually, that's a relief for us. That's something we've been sort of struggling with, doing games in two languages at the same time. That gets, so that's sort of a bit of a relief this time to only focus on one language.
Yeah. I just one last question, which you don't necessarily have to answer. Any predators? Sorry,
I would say
boring question maybe, but
no. I mean, I guess the short answer is no.
fine. As I said, I wasn't really expecting an
I
answer.
didn't catch the questions. I'm just looking like a
It looks like
question mark here.
Any predators?
I might cut
Okay,
this.
okay. No, I thought you said any creditors. I was like, what? Any predators?
Yeah, I hear that
well-
creditors are worse than predators, actually, aren't they?
No predators currently planned. But I mean, you never know.
Fine, I wish I hadn't asked the question.
Now. Alien franchise, not these the other ones.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting question because what I'm trying to do with the game as well is kind of opening up the universe so it's more threats out there than just the alien, because the alien is obviously the big one. But we also want a game where you shouldn't expect to meet an alien in every adventure.
Yeah, I like
We're
that.
trying to introduce some new threats.
So I noticed, broadly speaking, the films have a US-centric world government or something, sort of US Marine Corps going out and doing that. Whereas already reading the book, we can see there's 3 sort of Earth geopolitical power blocks. Weyland-Yutani are actually British-Japanese in their origins, working in close cooperation with the US government on all the colonies that we've found, but there are other corporate entities as well. So it strikes me a campaign game is going to be very political as well as horror, or sometimes instead of horror. Is that right?
Yeah, there's also there's a socialist bloc called the UPP, Union of Progressive Peoples, which is actually from William Gibson's draft script for Alien 3 that never was published.
Okay,
So there's
excellent.
lots of stuff, and it's a canon.
It's all canon.
Yeah.
We didn't make this stuff up.
No, so but it's fun because there's lots more to the setting than what's in the movies.
Yeah. So this is, I think, is really cool thing that, I mean, you get to sort of to showcase this and explore these parts of the universe that you might not see at all if you just watch the movies.
No, that's really good, because I'm very much a movie fan, but I've not read. Well, I've read a few of the comics as well. So, Newt's story is actually one of the things that I'm thinking we might base this survival game on.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I'm now reading River of Pain at your recommendation, Nils. But yes, I was wondering about all those many draft scripts for Alien 3 and Alien 4 and what impact they'd have, and where you've got all these different power blocks from. So it's really good to hear that they're actually coming out of all those different takes on the alien universe and molding it all into one whole.
Yeah, and I think just to elaborate on the point Nils made before, that a challenge with this game, and this ties into what we were just talking about, is that every scenario cannot have the same, creature to face at the end. So, and that means you have to sort of have a bigger world and a more. If you want to play campaign in this world, it cannot all be about fighting an alien monster. It has to have other factions, creatures, things, and that's sort of where the world building comes in, to sort of give the world more versatility and more breadth, basically.
Yeah, I can actually recommend another book while we're talking about that. It's called Aliens Bug Hunt, and it's a short story collection which is based on the throwaway line from the Aliens movie where they say, "Is this going to be another stand-up fight or a bug hunt?" So someone thought we'll make a book about bug hunts, but it's this is
Nils,
short story.
have you got access to my Amazon account? Because about 2 hours ago I ordered those 2 books on Amazon.
Yeah, that's a good one. No, I haven't. But in that book, not everything is excellent, but some of it is really good. And I like that they take some liberties with the universe and introduce new threats and turn the tables. There's particularly one short story, which I won't spoil here, which completely turns expectations. So the Marines in that, they're sent to explore something. They face a threat that you don't expect at all, which is introduced a new kind of horror. And I think there's lots of parameters you can play with in this universe to not make the unexpected too expected.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That sounds excellent. Well, I think we've taken up enough of your time, gentlemen. It's been a delight chatting to you as always. Look forward to seeing you in the very near future, and all the best with the ongoing launch of the Alien RPG.
Thank you, and I hope to see you soon in Birmingham.
Yep.
We'll see you very soon. There's a bit of history as to how we got into the position to have this great opportunity to chat to the guys. And Nils spoke to me a little while ago and invited Matt and I to the UK Games Expo as part of the Fria Ligan team in order just to help them out on the day. I think they just, it was great of them to think of us and invite us to help them just run the stall and be part of the Fria Ligan team. At the expo in Birmingham.
Yeah, we were pleased and honoured to be invited, but I
delighted.
think we
absolutely
had no idea at the time of the ulterior motive.
We had no idea at the time at all. No, and it was a short while afterwards, a few weeks later, that Nils then came back to us with the intriguing. At that moment anyway, suggestion that there was this big new thing coming, and would we be willing to run the demos for it at the expo for them? Which we went, okay, why on earth wouldn't we do that? Yes.
Sight unseen. We don't know what it is. Yeah, we're really keen and excited for it.
So we spent a bit of whiles speculating whilst we got some paperwork out of the way. We were really pleased then to get access to the starter pack.
Yeah, so I open the email and I look at what it is, and of course it's not just in the starter pack. He explains finally what it is, and I thought, well, Dave's going to be really happy because I know this is one of your favourite franchises. We've talked about Nemesis, the board game you bought, in an effort to have some sort of alien role-playing experience, and now we've got it, and it's one of our favourite companies making it.
Indeed, and what they've done is really good. We love the Year Zero engine. It works in so many different ways. They've changed it subtly. The stress and the panic dynamic, that works really nicely from what I've seen. We haven't played it yet, but we're going to have a go of it. With our group at some point, and it's another thing that they've done. I mean, this is the step into the big league for Fria Ligan. Getting a Fox licensing agreement, if they can deliver this, and on the strength of the game and the strength of their aspirations, they surely can. But if they could deliver this, then who knows what's next? They could, the world could be their oyster. This is a great step for Tomas, Nils, Costa, and everybody else at Fria Ligan, and I'm delighted for them. And I'm also really delighted and, as you say, honoured to be kind of invited into the room with them to help make it work. And
because we ought to say the thing they don't want us to do is run the quick start scenario that has already been developed and shared with us.
No.
For a start, we want to get as many people as possible as want to over the weekend to get a chance to enjoy the game. So we've got to run something a bit shorter, and they've asked us to because partly I think because of what we did with the Grindbone tournament as well at Dragon Meet, to put together a thing that gives you all the flavour of the game in a limited amount of time. So we're working on that even as we speak. And that's great. I mean, being invited to write the demo game is brilliant. I mean, wow, great. I'm almost. If I could be speechless, I would be speechless. But it's pretty rare. You said something like, when we started this podcast, you had some pretty wild dreams about where it might go. Well, when we started the podcast nearly. Is it nearly three? It is 2 years ago, actually. 2 years ago. Yeah. We didn't even know whether we'd get off the ground with the first podcast. No. I had this thought in my mind that if we do well and we can build a following and we can make friends with some excellent game makers and some great people, that we might be able to get involved in the industry a little bit. And
here we are, getting involved in the industry a little bit. It's brilliant.
But you never guessed then that it might be on one of your favourite franchises.
No, that's true. The only thing that could top it if it had been The Thing.
Yeah.
If it had been The Thing game, then I would have, well, I'd have just given them all the stuff I've done on The Thing before and say, there you go, publish that. Or maybe not.
Or maybe not. So,
but yes,
that brings us to the end of this programme, doesn't it?
Well, the key thing, last thing to say to everyone, if you want to have a look at this game, if you want to have a play of this game, get your asses along to Birmingham, May the 31st to June the 2nd, at the NEC. Come and find the Free League stand. You'll find a sign-up sheet. I expect this might be popular, so get in early to avoid disappointment. But come along, see the Free League guys, see us, play Alien, have a great time. Cool. Well, until next time, everybody, thanks for listening, and it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
And may
the icons bless your adventures. Oh, I think so still.
Still, yeah, we can't change that tagline, can we?
No. And may the icons bless your adventures. You have been listening to The Coriolis Effect, presented by Fiction Suit with the RPG Gods, with music by Stars on a Black Sea, used with permission of Free League Publishing. Imagery from NASA and the Hubble Space Telescope, brought to you by Wikimedia Commons. Typeface is Code by Font Fabric.